And I think the Egyptian example actually points that out in a very interesting way. While the We Are All Khaled Saeed page that Courtney described, and I'm going to pull it up just to kind of show everyone what it looks like. Okay. All right. So this is the We Are All Khaled Saeed page, which was the first page to actually call for a protest on January 27th. And for those of you who understand the story, the reason why the page came into being is because a young man, a Google executive called Wa'il Ghunaim, decided to set up the page to commemorate and honor a young businessman in Alexandria who had been beaten and brutalized and killed in a public place outside of an internet cafe. And of course, the reason why the page was actually, of course, there are campaigns against police brutality in Egypt, and some of them had started showing up online even before the We Are All Khaled Saeed campaign actually went online. But the reason why this was incredibly iconic and had a significant impact was largely because a photograph was taken inside the morgue of the young Khaled Saeed's face, and it had been completely contorted beyond recognition. I mean, even the family members couldn't recognize him, and that circulated very widely via mobile technology, and eventually made its way to Egyptian private stations. And of course, there is a concert between the two. And Wa'il Ghunaim was communicating with some of these satellite stations and compelling them to write to publish or to air information about this campaign. Now, when the campaign decided to go from the online sphere to the offline realm, they had to contest with some significant obstacles. Some of these obstacles were placed by the government in the existence of the emergency law that prohibited the convergence of any more than 5 individuals in a public space, or at least can be used to disperse any major protest. So what they did was to organize silent protests where individuals tried to stand as far away from each other, and they didn't look at the police in any way. So you might have seen the iconic images of people dressed in black in mourning and reading from their holy books, whether it's the Quran or the Bible, staring at a body of water, whether it's the Nile or the Mediterranean Sea or the Red Sea, and it happened across Egypt. But when I went out to the first protest, and I'm going to show you a video that I was able to shoot in Alexandria in June of last year, just to sort of illustrate the numbers that we're talking about. This is the very first protest in Alexandria. Now, if the camera were to pan across, you would notice that we're talking about no more than 250 people in the very first protest. And, of course, as the months went by and the protests increased in number, the numbers increased as well. But unfortunately, the largest protest for the Khaled Saeed campaign did not exceed 2,500 people. So the question here is, well, what is the capacity, what capacity do online activists have to catapult the message? Now, for those who sympathized with the campaign, many of them added themselves to the page. But the page had, before January 25th, had somewhere in the range of 440,000 members. So what happened between January 25th and current day to bring the page up to the 1 million plus viewers? And there are some interesting observations in that regard. First of all, Wa'il Ghunaim was, well, actually, let's backtrack a little bit. As soon as the demonstrations on January 25th appeared to have taken a turn for the serious, and the government had underestimated the extent to which various opposition groups were capable of bringing people out into the streets, that's when information circulated very widely, and many people became interested in the group that had called for the protest initially. So we started seeing a spike in the number of members on the group. Then the next major day was Friday, January 28th, the so-called Day of Rage, when the police, of course, responded with brute force. And at this point, it was fairly evident that the majority of political forces in Egypt, with the exception of the NDP, were supporting the protest. The Muslim Brotherhood played a minimal role, or at least publicly did not advocate for participation. And the April 6th groups, who initially had not anticipated the size of the protests. I mean, I spoke to some folks from the April 6th movement, and they were talking. And if you were to watch some of the documentaries, one that was broadcast on Al Jazeera, and another documentary by Lily Paquette called "We Are Egypt," which basically followed the April 6th movement prior to January 25th, it was evident that even the most ambitious sort of estimates of how many people they would get out to the protests on 25th and beyond had been completely blown out of the water, that this was more than anyone had expected. In fact, when regrouping after the January 25th protest, many of them were busy sort of trying to figure out what to do next. And the main idea was, well, do we come out and protest on Friday? We'll set up a page for the Friday protest, and we'll also set up a protest for April 6th. Perceiving that nothing might, that you might have numbers swell, but you can't expect change to happen between now and April 6th. And many of them were surprised to see that the protests had completely, had taken a turn in such a way that that people came out and participated in protests on Tuesday and on Wednesday without prior organization or planning or mobilization on the part of April 6th. So all of a sudden, the tidal wave had already happened. Now, of course, they had strategies to compel people to come out into the streets. Many of them went into poor neighborhoods, busy areas, and called on people to come down. They were distributing leaflets. On January 25th, I was told that young women would go into stores and talk men into protesting as well, telling them, how could you let your woman protest for you? You need to come out, or things. Or for instance, there is of course a discussion about the socioeconomic component to all of this. Most observers will tell you that the first day of protests, it was the sort of the liberal elite, or there might have been a disproportionate number of the liberal elite, the aristocracy, those who at least are on one side of the digital divide, given the fact that you had a large number of participants from Facebook, or who had been compelled by Facebook, the cyberactivists, that they constituted a large number of individuals. And so when shop owners along downtown Cairo, or many parts of Cairo that led up to Tahrir Square on the first day of protests, would stop and tell them, well, what is it that you're protesting? You look like you're not of modest means. I mean, there were people walking around with Louis Vuitton bags, and so what is it that you're protesting? And people would answer back to the shopkeepers and tell them, we're protesting for your rights. This is a movement to bring you political rights, to take money from those who've stolen Egypt's resources over the years. And so all of a sudden there was an active strategy to try and compel the majority into participation.